Two of Marvel's most powerful sorcerers, Doctor Doom and Doctor Strange, were suddenly torn from their universe and hurled into the grim, merciless nightmare of Warhammer 40K. Before you answer, hold that thought, because what you're about to hear isn't just a crossover. This is a collision of destinies, a clash of philosophies, and a brutal unraveling of reality itself. Imagine two minds shaped by magic, science, and cosmic discipline suddenly dropped into a universe where hope is a myth and survival is a privilege earned through blood. Imagine their power meeting in a galaxy where gods feast on souls and warfare is eternal. Now imagine what they would become when forced to adapt or perish. But before we step fully into the warp-torn storm, let's slow down, just a breath, and draw the first circle of context around them. Dr. Stephen Strange, Sorcerer Supreme, Master of the Mystic Arts, a guardian who rebuilt himself from ruin, and Victor Von Doom, a king, forged in brilliance and arrogance, his power carved from intellect, sorcery, and unbreakable will. Two men bound by rivalry, by a shared understanding of what true power costs, and by the knowledge that they could never escape each other's shadow. Their journey begins long before the first demons scream their welcome, before they stand on the ashes of a broken world, before they challenge the wills of gods older than time, before they make choices that will scorch entire sectors of the galaxy. Tonight, you will witness not just a story, you'll witness a transformation, a descent, a collision between two universes that were never meant to meet. And here's something special for you. If you stay with this tale until the end, you'll unlock a hidden reveal, a final twist that reshapes everything you thought you knew about both sorcerers and their place in the 40K universe. Trust me, you'll want to hear that revelation. It's the kind of payoff that leaves you staring into the void, questioning whether fate is written or forged. The mystery began with a tremor, a vibration in the fabric of existence so subtle that even Stephen Strange, deep in meditation atop Sanctum's highest chamber, felt it like a needle pressed against the soul. He opened his eyes sharply. This was not a disturbance from his universe. It was something older, heavier, and impossibly distant, as if a dying cosmos were screaming across the dark between realities. At the same moment, high above Latveria, Dr. Doom stood within the heart of his arcane, engineered dimensional rift generator, a machine forged from mathematics and forbidden incantations. He felt the ripple too, an echo brushing against the edges of his armor, whispering warnings his pride refused to hear. Strange was the first to move. The moment the distortion intensified, he descended into the sanctum's main atrium, where relics rattled on their shelves and sigils flared like lightning trapped in glass. Walls pulsed with crimson warp, light flickering between sanity and chaos. "This is no natural fracture, this is an invitation," he murmured. But an invitation from what? Every instinct in him screamed that something was pulling, not pushing, something ravenous, something ancient enough to bend the very notion of distance. Meanwhile, Doom tightened the clamps around his gauntlets and activated the rift generator's core. He spoke in a steady, confident voice, announcing that you cannot reach greatness without forcing the universe to acknowledge you. His machine sparked, reality cracked, and his power met the distortion head-on. But instead of opening a path he controlled, the anomaly swallowed him whole, an unseen hand dragging him into a vortex of shifting colors and psychic madness. Doom roared, not in fear but indignation, as his armor overloaded with impossible readings. Strange reacted seconds too late. The distortion snapped open like a cosmic jaw. A surge of warp energy, unnatural and venomous, lanced into the sanctum and coiled around him. He tried to anchor himself with spells of stability, but the warp is not bound by the laws of his magic. It is chaos given form, a storm of emotion and hunger. With a final pull, he too was consumed, torn away from his universe and hurled into the nightmare between stars. Neither man saw the other in the moment of their fall. Neither had time to question whether this was coincidence or design. Instead, they plunged through a torrent of visions no mortal mind should witness. They saw empires burning, titans marching across battlefields the size of continents, worlds ground to dust beneath the endless war of gods and mortals. Strange felt something clawing at his essence, trying to brand him with symbols he dared not comprehend. Doom felt 1,000 malicious intelligences scrutinizing him, testing whether he was prey or a threat. And then, with a violence that shattered breath and thought, they emerged. A scorched horizon stretched beneath a dead sky. The air tasted like ash and sorrow. The ground trembled with distant artillery fire, and a cracked moon loomed overhead like a broken omen. Strange crashed first, a crater of smoldering earth surrounding him as he gasped for breath. Doom struck nearby, his landing shaking the ruins of an obliterated settlement. For a long moment, neither spoke. They simply stood, battered yet unbroken, staring at a world that radiated hopelessness so strongly it felt physical. Strange sensed it instantly. The psychic scar, the taint in atmosphere, the overwhelming dread that pressed against the mind like a grinding blade. This place, he whispered, is wrong. Doom adjusted his armor, scanning the sky, the soil, the faint traces of warp residue. His voice was iron. This place is a challenge. And from somewhere beyond the horizon, something monstrous roared, its voice echoing like a god's laughter. The roar that cut across the horizon was not merely sound. It was a declaration, a territorial warning from something enormous, something used to carving its authority into the bones of anyone foolish enough to trespass. Dust rippled across the wrecked landscape as Strange and Doom instinctively shifted into defensive stances, each sensing the magnitude of what was approaching. Strange conjured a shimmering ward, fragile at first, then solidifying into a radiant shield as his breathing steadied. Doom's gauntlets hummed with arcane power and raw technological fury, ready to unleash devastation at a moment's notice. The ground quaked, not metaphorically literally. The very soil convulsed beneath them like a dying beast. Strange felt the warp tremble, as though something was forcing its presence through layers of corrupted space. Doom's sensors blared incomprehensible warnings. A dark silhouette crested the far ridge, towering, brutal, and unmistakably hostile. It was a chaos-possessed engine of war, a twisted amalgam of iron and flesh. Its limbs moved with a grotesque rhythm, mechanical pistons hissing while sinews writhed like living ropes beneath armor plates, etched with runes of damnation. Strange's voice was quiet. "This machine, it is alive." Doom observed with a colder, more calculating stare. "No. This is no life. This is bondage incarnate." But despite his disdain, even Doom could feel the oppressive horror radiating off the abomination. It was powered by something far beyond steam or circuitry. Something psychic, hateful, and endlessly hungry. The demon engine's gaze, if such a thing could be called a gaze, locked onto them. Its internal glow brightened to a murderous crimson, and in a single heartbeat it charged. Strange acted first, launching himself upward with a burst of mystic momentum. Energy surged from his hands, curving into a barrage of crystalline sigils that detonated against the engine's hide. The explosions tore chunks of metal free, revealing coils of throbbing muscle beneath. But the creature did not slow. Doom braced himself and unleashed a beam of raw annihilation from his gauntlet, carving a searing path through the toxic air. The beam struck the beast square in the chest, forcing it back several meters with a shriek that rattled the ruins. Yet still it came. Strange landed beside Doom, cloak fluttering violently. "It's feeding on our attacks. The warp within it grows stronger when provoked." "Then we shall not provoke," Doom replied. "We shall dominate." With a sweeping motion, Doom slammed his armored boot into the dirt, triggering an eruption of sigils beneath the demon engine. The symbols blazed emerald and gold, Latverian sorcery fused with Doom's personal genius. The ground surged upward, entrapping the monstrous machine in jagged spines of enchanted earth. For a moment, the thing struggled, shrieking and writhing as the trap tightened. Strange extended his hands, calling upon incantations that predated his mantle as Sorcerer Supreme. Light bent around his fingertips, swirling into a sphere that throbbed with controlled fury. He thrust it outward, and a wave of binding magic enveloped the engine, weaving chains of spectral energy that wrapped around its limbs and torso. The creature convulsed violently, its warp, tainted core flickering, but in this universe, nothing bound to chaos dies quietly. The demon engine unleashed a psychic roar so potent it fractured Strange's barrier and sent Doom staggering back. The earth split, warp fire spewing from the cracks. The creature tore free from Doom's trap and lunged, jaws of molten metal opening wide enough to devour them both. Strange reacted with pure instinct, forming a dimensional fold, a slit in space. The beast's jaws closed on empty air as the fold snapped shut, teleporting Strange behind it. Doom seized the opening, thrusting both arms forward and hurling a concentrated blast of sorcery and plasma. The blast met the engine's exposed core, rupturing it in a violent cascade of light, smoke, and screaming metal. The explosion thundered across the wasteland. When the smoke cleared, the demon engine lay defeated, its twisted frame steaming, its demon soul shrieking faintly as it dissipated into the warp like smoke stolen by the wind. Strange exhaled heavily. That was our welcome. Doom inspected the smoldering carcass, his expression unreadable behind the mask. If this world seeks to intimidate Doom, it has failed. But Strange wasn't convinced. He looked out across the desolation, sensing countless presences lurking just beyond comprehension. Whispering, watching, testing. This place is soaked in cruelty. Something wanted us to see that creature. Something wanted to measure us. Doom turned, cloak shifting behind him like a storm cloud. Let it measure. Then let it tremble. But before Strange could answer, a piercing psychic cry tore across the planet. A distress beacon, desperate and human. Strange flinched at the pain embedded within it. Doom's armor registered the source immediately, a battlefield several kilometers away, and worse, the unmistakable signature of an approaching Chaos warband. Strange met Doom's gaze. We may not belong in this world, but those people they do, and they're dying. Doom responded without hesitation. Then let them serve our purpose. Their survival may lead us to the knowledge needed to escape this forsaken realm. Strange almost argued, but the screams in his mind were too urgent. Without another word, the two sorcerers moved toward the distant battle, not knowing that their arrival would alter the fate of an entire Imperial regiment, and that the eyes of far greater powers were already turning toward them. The psychic cry led them across a ravaged expanse where the air itself wavered from distant bombardments. Smoke clouds rose like wounded giants, and the thunder of heavy artillery rolled across the plains in endless, merciless waves. Strange felt each blast like a tremor in his chest. Human lives, flickering and extinguishing across the battlefield. Doom analyzed the patterns of explosions, calculating trajectories, mapping enemy formations with frightening speed. Even here, in a universe not his own, the mind of Victor von Doom adapted instantly. When they reached the final ridge, they saw the catastrophe below. An Imperial Guard regiment, exhausted, blood-soaked, and horrifically outmatched, was pinned against the shattered remains of an ancient Prometheum refinery. Their armor was cracked, their formation broken, and their courage stretched to its final thread. Strange sensed their fear like waves of cold water, yet beneath it lay something remarkable, defiance, even as demon. Warped monstrosities barreled toward them, even as lasguns overheated in their trembling hands. The guardsmen refused to retreat. In another world, Strange might have admired them. Doom, however, saw only inefficiency, primitive weapons, crude tactics, and yet, he paused, studying their morale as one might inspect a curious artifact. They stand. Even knowing they will die, Strange whispered, courage like that is a power in itself. Below them, Chaos Marauders surged forward. Some were warped beyond human recognition, skin fused with armor, mouths stretched into permanent screams, limbs sprouting claws that dripped with warp venom. Others wore the rusted insignias of dark gods, their chants rising in violent crescendos. Behind them marched a hellbrute, a grotesque prison of metal and rotting flesh, its occupant screaming silently inside its armored sarcophagus. Strange felt the psychic agony emanating from the creature. This universe is cruelty distilled. And yet, Doom said, it bleeds like any other. A massive explosion rocked the battlefield. The Hellbrute had unleashed a barrage of corrupted plasma, reducing a trench line to molten ruin. Guardsmen were flung into the air like broken dolls. Their commanding officer, a scarred woman with a bionic eye, shouted for reinforcements that would never come. Strange clenched his fists. Doom's eyes narrowed behind his mask. This fight is moments from collapse. Strange said, if we don't intervene, they will die. Doom finished, yes. And then, after the briefest pause, so let us intervene. Doom did not wait for further discussion. He strode forward, boots striking the ground with iron purpose. Strange followed, gathering spells of protection, energy, and disruption. They crested the ridge, and the entire battlefield seemed to pause, not in recognition, but in confusion, when two figures descended into the chaos like living omens. The first, Chaos Marauders who approached them charged with reckless bloodlust. Strange flicked his wrist, conjuring a barrier that transformed their claws into harmless sparks. Doom countered with a blast that hurled them backward, armor denting inward from the force. The guardsmen stared in disbelief, their morale shifting from dread to stunned hope. The Hellbrute turned its attention toward these newcomers, roaring a metallic shriek that rattled the air. It raised its weapon, mounted arm, and fired a beam of corrupted plasma directly at the sorcerers. Strange reacted instantly, raising a spectral disk of shimmering force. The beam struck, bending the shield backward but failing to break it. Doom extended his gauntlet and siphoned the excess energy, storing it within his armor with a growl of satisfaction, crude but useful. The Hellbrute charged, its massive steps shaking the earth. Doom teleported forward using raw sorcery, appearing at the creature's flank. A green burst of concussive force hammered the Hellbrute's armor, cracking open a segment of its plating. Strange circled behind it, weaving an incantation that bound the beast's limbs with luminous chains that glowed with celestial fire. The Hellbrute thrashed violently, nearly breaking free. The tortured soul within it howled in desperation, a cry that made Strange wince. The guardsmen watched in awe as the two sorcerers fought not like mortals, but like forces of nature. Doom leapt onto the Hellbrute's back, plunging his gauntlet deep into the exposed machinery. His armor hummed as he overloaded circuits with a surge of arcane energy. Kneel, he commanded, voice thundering with unnatural force. The Hellbrute collapsed to one knee, its limbs spasming. Strange conjured a final sigil above its head, a symbol of release, mercy, and peaceful dissolution. He whispered a phrase, and the sigil detonated in a silent flash of light. The Hellbrute fell still. For the first time in centuries, tormented soul inside it knew peace. The remaining Chaos Marauders faltered. The guardsmen surged forward with renewed fury, pressing the advantage. In minutes, the tide had turned. The battlefield fell quiet, save for the crackling fires and the labored breathing of survivors. The commanding officer approached Strange and Doom, gripping her lasgun tightly. Her voice was hoarse, wary, yet grateful. Who or what are you? Strange opened his mouth, then hesitated, because even he didn't fully know anymore. But Doom had no such hesitation. We, he said, are power. The officer swallowed hard. Then the Emperor has guided you to us." Doom did not respond. Strange looked toward the dark sky and felt a chill. Something was watching, something vast, something ancient, and somewhere in the warp, 4 dark gods whispered hungrily. 2 new players had entered their game. Night fell like a dying breath over the battlefield. The flames from wrecked vehicles flickered in the distance, casting long shadows across the broken ground. Strange moved among the wounded guardsmen, healing what he could, not through mundane medicine, but through gentle spells that knitted wounds and soothed agony. Many stared at him with wide, reverent eyes, whispering prayers they barely understood. Strange felt their gratitude, but also their fear. In this universe, anything that looked like sorcery might as well be heresy. Doom, meanwhile, prowled the outskirts of the encampment like a predator stalking the perimeter of a new domain. His gaze scanned the sky, blackened, starless, heavy with warp, taint. He felt it more clearly now, the pressure, the weight, the unseen presence that slithered across the edges of his thoughts. It was not trying to overpower him. It was studying him, measuring him, judging what kind of threat he might become. Strange joined him, cloak billowing softly in the cold wind. "I sense them," he murmured. Doom didn't look at him. Who? The voices, the entities that rule this universe through fear and corruption. They're curious about us. Doom's gauntlet tightened slightly. Let them be curious. Doom kneels to know God. Strange shook his head. "These are not gods you have known. They are madness made manifest." Then Doom will teach madness discipline. Before Strange could argue, the wind shifted. A whisper, a psychic tremor, brushed their minds. It carried no words, only emotion, hunger, delight, amusement, and beneath it all, a cold, calculating interest. Strange stiffened. They're closer than before. But the voice that answered him was not from the warp. "You fight with the fury of angels and the chaos of sorcerers, yet you are neither." The commanding officer approached, her cloak tattered but her posture strong. Her bionic eye glowed faintly. "You saved my regiment today. For that, I owe you thanks. But I also owe the Imperium the truth. And so I must ask again, who are you?" Strange's expression softened. "We come from another universe, not by choice." The officer blinked, unsure whether to scoff or shudder. "Another universe." "Yes," Strange said gently. "One without an emperor, without the warp, without the ruin that consumes this galaxy." Doom folded his arms. "Yet your galaxy endures, despite its ignorance." The officer said nothing for a long moment. She simply stared at them, weighing their power against her sense of duty. Then she made a decision. "My name is Captain Marinier Voss, 9th Harken Infantry. If what you say is true, then you are both anomalies, and anomalies are dangerous." She hesitated before adding, "But you saved us. And right now, the 9th has nowhere else to turn." Strange nodded. "We only seek knowledge. We must understand this place if we are to find a way home." Doom corrected him immediately. "We must understand this place so that we may conquer our fate. If a path home exists, Doom will tear it from the heart of this cursed universe." Captain Voss glanced between them. "If you want answers, then you'll need to speak with the Harken Strategic Command. They're stationed in the ruins of Hive Saros, 2 days' march from here." Her jaw tightened. If it still stands. Strange felt another ripple in the psychic wind. This one harsher, more insistent. Something was following them, something enormous, something neither mortal nor entirely demon. "We should leave soon," he said quietly. Doom nodded once, not in agreement, but in recognition of a fact already known. Something stalks us. And indeed, beyond the shattered mountains to the east, the warp shimmered like a boiling sea. Shapes writhed in its glow. Serpentine, skeletal, insectoid, all dissolving before their forms could fully manifest. But their intent was unmistakable. They had noticed the newcomers. They were coming. Captain Voss shivered as she followed their gaze. "Emperor, protect us, what is that?" Strange exhaled slowly. "A storm, one that has been waiting for us since the moment we arrived." Doom's eyes narrowed behind his mask. "Let it break upon us." Doom does not fear storms, but Strange heard something else beneath the howling warp winds, beneath the distant rumbling of artillery, beneath the murmured prayers of guardsmen, a voice, soft, velvet, deceptively gentle. "Sorcerer champion, wanderers from another reality, come to us. Come and be remade." Strange staggered slightly. Doom's armor crackled as he resisted the psychic intrusion. Captain Voss grabbed her weapon. What was that? Strange swallowed hard. "That was not a voice meant for you. It was meant for us." And far above, unseen by mortal eyes, 4 vast consciousnesses shifted, each one eager, each one watching. 2 new powers had entered their domain, and the warp wanted them. Night deepened, thick as tar, as the 9th Harken Infantry prepared to move. Guardsmen whispered prayers under their breath while loading ammunition, tightening straps, or clutching holy symbols carved from bone and metal scraps. Strange felt each prayer as a flicker of fragile hope, a hope that flickered even brighter in the oppressive darkness surrounding them. Doom, however, seemed almost invigorated by the fear in the air, as if the tension sharpened his already razor-edged intellect. The warp storm on the horizon pulsed like a living wound in the sky. It throbbed with colors no human eye should see, twisting the world around it into unnatural shapes. Strange watched it uneasily. He could feel the presence of the 4 Korn, Tzinch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh interwoven into the psychic gale. Each whisper was distinct, calling to different parts of the soul. Korn's rage pressed against Strange's mind, urging him to abandon restraint and embrace violence. Tzinch offered visions of cosmic truths, whispered promises of forbidden knowledge. Nurgle tried to lull him into a cold, numb resignation. Slaanesh beckoned with a voice so beautiful it almost hurt to resist. Strange forced himself to breathe steadily. "They're testing us, pulling at the edges of who we are." Doom scoffed. "Let them pull. Doom cannot be unmade by mere illusions." But Strange sensed the subtle truth Doom refused to acknowledge. The warp was intrigued by him most of all. Doom was a man whose ambition rivaled the very gods of this universe, and ambition was a currency the warp knew well. Captain Voss approached the 2 sorcerers, her expression hard but her voice steady. "If we march at dawn, we may reach outskirts of Hive Saros before nightfall tomorrow, but we'll have to cross the Ashen Valley. It's a graveyard of armor columns and dead men, and it's never quiet." Strange asked gently, "What haunts it?" Her answer was immediate. "The warp." Doom stepped toward the captain. "You fear phantoms too much." She fixed him with a cold stare. "We fear what kills our entire regiments overnight. There's a difference." Before Doom could respond, the ground trembled just for a moment, but enough to silence every voice nearby. The air grew heavy, as if the world itself inhaled and held its breath. Strange felt it, an immense ripple of psychic pressure rolling across the land like a tidal wave. He steadied himself, though the force nearly drove him to his knees. Doom's armor flared with defensive sigils, absorbing the backlash. Guardsmen panicked, ducking behind barricades, gripping their weapons with white knuckles. Captain Voss whispered, "Emperor, what was that?" Strange's voice was grim. "A summoning. Something powerful just tore its way into this world." A faint metallic scream echoed across the plains, followed by a distant rumble of armored treads crushing debris. Strange strained to identify the signature. The psychic imprint was monstrous, disciplined, and drenched in hatred. Doom murmured, "Something approaches with purpose. Something familiar." Strange glanced sharply at him. "You sense it too." Doom nodded slowly. "The presence reminds me of a warrior. A conqueror, a being forged for battle." His voice dropped, becoming almost reverent. "Someone worthy." A chill ran through Strange. Worthy of what? Doom didn't answer. The wind shifted suddenly, sweeping through the camp with the scent of ozone and blood. Strange turned his gaze toward the horizon, and froze. A silhouette emerged from darkness, towering, armored, radiating psychic fury like a burning beacon. The guardsmen cried out in terror, many falling to their knees. Captain Voss gasped, her voice shaking. "No, no, it can't be." The silhouette stepped fully into view. A Chaos Space Marine champion. A towering giant clad in corrupted power armor, etched with runes glowing like molten iron. His helmet, shaped like a snarling skull, dripped with warp fire. A massive chain axe hung from his fist, its teeth churning eagerly. Strange felt bile rise in his throat. The creature was a human twisted into a god of war. Doom's stance shifted, not backward, but forward, drawn toward the challenge. Strange whispered, "He's marked by Khorne." Captain Voss trembled. "That's not just a warrior. That's a warlord." "We're dead." The Chaos Champion surveyed the battlefield with contempt before fixing his blazing gaze on Doom and Strange. His voice was a thunderclap dipped in rage. "You," Strange swallowed. "He addressing us." The champion strode forward, the earth trembling under each step. Two sorcerers who slay demon engines. Who bind warp and matter with ease. Who fight like gods. His chain axe revved hungrily. "The blood god demands your skulls." Strange prepared a spell. Doom raised his gauntlets. But then something strange happened. The champion stopped a few paces away and tilted his head, studying Doom with an intensity that went beyond hatred. Then he spoke again, more slowly this time, almost uncertainly. "But you are different. Your soul burns with a fire not born of this galaxy." Doom stood tall, unshaken. "You sense greatness." The champion growled. "I sense defiance." His eyes narrowed. "I sense that the warp wants you. And I am commanded to take you to the altar alive." Strange's heart thundered. "Doom, don't entertain this." But Doom stepped forward boldly. "If the warp wants Doom, let it come claim me itself." The champion roared in fury. Strange braced for battle. The guardsmen prayed, and somewhere deep within the warp, four gods leaned closer. The game was about to begin. The Chaos Champion launched forward with terrifying speed. For a giant wrapped in tons of corrupted ceramite, he moved like a force of nature, one driven by the rage of a god who demanded blood with every heartbeat. His chain axe screamed, its teeth spinning so violently that sparks showered the ground as it dragged across the rocks. Guardsmen scattered in panic, shouting warnings, but Strange and Doom stood their ground. Strange reacted first. With a swift motion, he carved a luminous arc through the air and conjured a barrier of interlocking geometric sigils. The chain axe struck it with an explosive crack, rippling the sigils outward like shattered glass, but the barrier held just long enough to deflect the first blow. Doom advanced behind the shield, his gauntlet charged with emerald power. He struck the champion in the chest with a surge of force meant to pulverize steel. The blow staggered the giant, but only for a breath. The champion's growl deepened, vibrating the very ground. "You dare strike the chosen of Khorne?" His voice was hot iron dragged across bone. "You dare resist the blood god?" He swung again, the momentum alone enough to carve a man in half. Strange teleported a few meters back, reappearing with a counterspell blazing in his hands. Doom conjured a field of magnetized force around himself, diverting the chain axe's path enough to save his own head by inches. Strange retaliated, unleashing a streaming barrage of golden sigils that detonated against the champion's armor. Each explosion cracked the corrupted plating, sending shards of molten ceramite spiraling through the air. The champion roared again, this time in exhilaration. Pain was fuel to him. Pain was devotion. He charged Strange directly. Doom seized his arm mid-charge with a gauntlet crackling with sorcery, enhanced strength. The champion responded by seizing Doom's chestplate and lifting him off the ground with impossible force. Your sorcery will amuse Khorne. The champion snarled, Your skull will honor him. Strange saw Doom's armor begin to buckle. Without hesitation, Strange slammed his staff into the earth, invoking a binding spell that twisted gravity around the champion's legs. The giant staggered, momentarily trapped in a vortex of crushing pressure. Doom tore himself free, landing with a thud but maintaining his composure. You presume too much, warrior. Doom bows to no tyrant mortal or divine. The champion broke Strange's spell with brute force, shaking off the distortion like mist. You speak with arrogance, sorcerer. He raised his chain axe high. Khorne will carve humility into your corpse. He brought the weapon down with enough force to split the earth. Strange swung his arm upward and summoned a shield of mystic crystal, but even that buckled under the titanic blow. Doom teleported behind the champion, unleashing a catastrophic blast of arcane fury directly into the exposed joints of the giant's armor. The explosion rocked the valley, sending warp, tainted smoke spiraling. Champion finally fell to one knee, not defeated but enraged. Strange could feel it, the warp answering his fury, feeding him strength. The ground boiled under his palms, blood seeped through the soil. The champion's power surged. Khorne watches. He rose to his full height again. A guardsman screamed, He's getting stronger. Captain Voss shouted over the chaos, Fall back. Give them space. But Strange and Doom didn't move. They couldn't. If they let this monster get past them, the entire regiment would be slaughtered. Strange's mind raced. The champion was feeding on violence itself. Every spell he cast, every blow landed, was fueling the warlord. They needed to break the cycle. Doom, Strange called, He's drawing strength from every act of aggression. We must change our strategy. Doom paused, assessing instantly. His mind, a machine of relentless logic, understood the problem as soon as Strange voiced it. Then we shall end this without feeding him further. The champion lunged at Doom with a blaze of warp fire in his eyes. Doom activated a sigil he rarely used, a spell not of destruction, but of inversion. As the champion swung, Doom opened a swirling rift that absorbed kinetic force and redirected it skyward in a pillar of shuddering energy. The champion's own momentum betrayed him, sending him stumbling forward. Strange seized the moment. He raised both hands, palms glowing with serene, silver light. Not aggressive magic, not destructive, but binding, calming, purifying, a spell normally reserved for pacifying corrupted spirits. The champion screamed in fury as the light wrapped around him like a cocoon, draining the warp, and enhanced rage from his soul. He thrashed violently, but every strike weakened rather than strengthened him. What is this? His voice cracked, suddenly less sure. Strange strained under the weight of the spell. I'm severing your connection to the warp. Without its rage to feed on, you are only flesh and metal. Doom stepped forward, gauntlet glowing, and now, warrior, you face Doom, not as a champion, but as prey. With a single decisive motion, Doom unleashed a concentrated burst of nullifying energy directly into the champion's helmet. The blast overloaded the corrupted circuits, shattered its psychic seals, and extinguished the warp. Fire burning within, the champion stiffened, then fell. The ground trembled as his massive form crashed into the valley floor. Silence smothered the battlefield. The guardsmen stared in disbelief. Captain Voss exhaled shakily. Strange wiped sweat from his brow. Doom stood over the fallen warrior, unflinching, studying him with cold curiosity. Strange whispered, "That won't go unnoticed." Doom nodded. "Good." As if on cue, the warp storm on the horizon flared violently, like an eye snapping open, and a new voice whispered into Strange's mind. "You robbed Khorne of his champion. The blood god has taken notice, and so have we." The four were watching more closely now. Their interest had become obsession. The whispers did not fade. They multiplied, layered over one another. Echoes of different tones. some serpentine and sweet, others roaring like distant volcanoes, others distorted into nauseating static that clawed at the mind. Strange stiffened instantly, his eyes narrowing as the air around him thickened with invisible pressure. Doom sensed it too, not through mysticism, but through the sudden distortion in the electromagnetic field around them, energy signatures that no science of his universe should have been able to detect. He turned slowly, scanning the horizon as if expecting the silhouette of a monster to rise from the storm. But nothing rose. Instead, the storm opened. The clouds tore down the middle like a ripped wound in reality. Light bled into the sky, illuminating the valley with colors that shouldn't exist, colors that shifted between forms too rapidly for the human brain to comprehend. The guardsmen fell to their knees, covering their eyes. Some cried out, others prayed. A few simply stared blankly, already broken by the psychic overload. Even Captain Voss looked shaken, his voice trembling as he whispered, "The warp is watching us." Strange stepped forward, the cloak of levitation settling around his shoulders like a living shield. "No, the warp doesn't watch us." His voice tightened. "The gods do." A laugh rolled across the mountains, deep, metallic, and pounding like war drums. Korn's voice, unmistakable, thundered through the minds of every living creature in a 100-mile radius. "A mortal sorcerer dares steal the fury of my chosen. You trespass on the domain of war. Blood shall answer blood." Before Strange could respond, a second voice slithered through the carnage. High, hissing, hypnotic. "Oh," Korn always shouting, "must you make such a spectacle? These intruders amuse me. Their potential fascinates me. Tease inch." A third voice oozed into existence, as if dripping from the sky itself, soft, sweet, seductive, promising pleasures that drove weaker minds mad. Their souls shine with such delightful tension. I want to reshape them, make them scream beautifully. Slaanesh. And finally came the fourth, a wet, gurgling whisper, a sound like bloated flesh splitting open, kind, gentle, horrifying. "They are sick with order, sick with purpose. I can cure them. I can give them peace. Nurgle." The four spoke together, and the world itself trembled under the impossible weight of their combined focus. The attention of the Chaos Gods was an extinction-level event. Strange's hands curled into fists. His mind remained sharp, but he felt the pressure building behind his temples, a psychic force pressing inward, testing for weaknesses, probing the depths of his humanity. Doom stood unflinching. His armor hummed with power as it automatically activated a dozen layers of shielding to protect his mind from intrusion. His voice cut through the valley with regal calm. "Chaos Gods," he said coldly, "your threats are meaningless." Doom kneels to no deity. The sky darkened instantly. The storm spiraled into a vortex. A presence loomed not physical, yet overwhelmingly real. The air thickened with such intensity that several guardsmen collapsed, gasping, their lungs refusing to function. Strange felt the psychic blast hit him directly. He staggered backward, barely managing to hold his mental defenses. Doom remained standing, but Strange noticed the faint flicker across Doom's armor, the momentary distortion of his systems. The gods had heard Doom, and they didn't like his tone. Inch's voice coiled around them like smoke. "Oh, he fascinates me most of all. Such arrogance, such potential for evolution." Slaanesh purred. "Yes, and imagine the beauty of breaking him. I would savor it." Korn bellowed, "I will have his skull." Nurgle sighed, "I will have his decay." Strange raised his staff and slammed its base into the ground. The cloak flared outward as if to challenge the storm. He projected his voice into the warp, a risky act but necessary, Chaos gods, hear me." His voice carried authority even amidst the howling storm. "You interfere with realms beyond your dominion. Doom and I are not of this universe, and we have no quarrel with your war." The sky responded with a chorus of overlapping laughter, 4 separate voices, mocking, echoing, multiplying until it felt like the entire sky was laughing at him. "Tease," each answered first, "that is precisely why you interest us." Slaanesh followed, "You do not belong, you break the rhythm of our endless dance." Nurgle crooned, "You are diseased with order, you needs correction." And Khorne roared, "You slew my champion, you are my quarrel." Then everything went silent. The storm froze. Time itself held its breath, and from within the warp, Tyr, something began to descend. Not a god, not their full form, the universe would have ended instantly, but an avatar, a manifestation of their collective will. A being tall enough to blot out mountains. A silhouette wrapped in every color and none. A presence composed of rage, corruption, despair, mutation, and temptation, blended into a single abominable shape. The Chaos Avatar stepped onto the mortal soil, each footfall breaking the ground as if reality itself recoiled from its touch. Strange whispered, "This is impossible." Doom did not whisper. He raised his gauntlet, energy rising like a newborn star. Nothing is impossible for Doom. The guardsmen fled. Captain Voss stared in pale horror. The very mountains trembled from the Avatar's impact. And then it spoke, not with a voice, but with existence itself. "You will serve." Strange inhaled sharply. Doom did not. He simply said, "Try." And the valley exploded with war. The Avatar's presence was a storm of psychic pressure, a living wound in the very fabric of reality. Its shape was incomprehensible, a shifting mass of jagged limbs, screaming faces, and molten light. Each heartbeat echoed like a war drum across the ashen valley, and every breath it exhaled corroded the air with despair. Strange staggered backward, clutching his staff, his magic flaring around him like a protective cocoon. Doom stood perfectly still, his armor humming as he absorbed the ambient energy, calculating, adapting, waiting for the precise instant to strike. The Avatar moved with impossible speed. Its first strike was a sweep of energy that obliterated the ground where the guardsmen had fled. Trees, rocks, the remnants of machinery, all disintegrated into warped ash. Strange barely managed to erect a barrier to shield himself and Doom from the first full brunt of the attack. Even then, the ground beneath them cracked, sending jagged fissures radiating outward like veins of molten metal. Strange's mind raced. Every spell he could muster would not be enough to destroy it. Every defensive measure would only delay the inevitable. The Avatar was feeding off their fear, their presence, their very existence in this universe, and it was growing stronger with each heartbeat. Doom did not hesitate. He raised his gauntlets to the sky, summoning all the latent power within his armor, all the sorcery he had mastered across realms, and all the science that allowed him to bend reality itself. A sphere of green fire ignited around him, rolling outward like a storm of raw energy. The Avatar recoiled slightly, as if surprised by the intensity, but it did not falter. Strange found his resolve. "We are not pawns," he shouted. His hands flared with silver, white light, as he drew the latent warp energy around him into a tightly controlled spell, bending it not to destruction, but to resonance. He struck the ground with a staff slammed hard enough to split stone. The energy spiraled upward, weaving with Doom's raw power, forming a chain of brilliance that struck the Avatar squarely across its core. The Avatar shrieked. Its psychic howl tore through the valley, bending air and earth alike. Faces and appendages writhed on its surface, thrashing against the force of combined mortal sorcery. It swung an enormous arm at Doom, who teleported instantly behind it, delivering a concentrated blast directly into the creature's midsection. Sparks of unearthly energy danced across its armor and flesh, carving cracks that glowed like searing coals. But it was not enough. Strange understood then what Doom had already realized. This was not merely a battle of strength or magic. It was a test of will. The Avatar wanted them broken, bent, converted into servants of the warp itself. And it was relentless. Every defense, every strike, every spell was met with equal force, magnified by the insidious power of the four gods. Then Strange shouted an incantation that pushed the boundaries of his training. The air around the Avatar shimmered, thick with invisible chains, symbols of containment forged from energy, discipline, and raw determination. It struggled against them, each thrash of its limbs warping reality in chaotic bursts, but Strange's will did not falter. Doom joined the effort, adding his genius, his sorcery, his unyielding command over reality. Together, they were no longer merely human sorcerers, they had become a singular force, a fusion of intellect, magic, and unbreakable will. The Avatar roared in fury, psychic shockwaves, flattening terrain in a widening circle. Its body distorted and shimmered as it sought escape, its rage escalating to an unbearable pitch. Strange's chains held fast. Doom's energy hammered at its very essence, dissecting and restructuring it. Sparks of warp energy exploded outward, creating an aurora of destruction visible across the valley. The combined force of Doom and Strange began to tear the Avatar apart, not physically, but at its core, the heart of its being. Its screams transformed from rage to terror, faces etched in agony appearing and disappearing across its shifting form. And then, with a final, soul-shattering shriek, the Avatar imploded inward, collapsing upon itself and leaving behind a void of silence that seemed to consume even light. Strange fell to his knees, exhausted, clutching his staff for support. Doom's armor glowed faintly, sensors and sigils overloading from the intensity of the confrontation. Both were battered, but neither was broken, and as the dust settled, the valley around them lay eerily quiet. Not peaceful, not safe, but silent. Captain Voss and the surviving guardsmen emerged cautiously from cover, eyes wide with awe and terror. Strange looked at Doom, voice hoarse but resolute. "We survived, but they are not finished." Doom's voice was low, resolute, and cold. "No god, no monster, no universe can bend Doom. Let them come. Let all the Chaos Gods see their limits." Strange glanced at the horizon, sensing ripples in the warp. The gods themselves observing, calculating, their interest now peaked to dangerous levels. "We've made ourselves targets," he said quietly. Doom's gaze swept the valley. Targets are opportunities, and Doom does not miss opportunities. Somewhere, in the depths of the warp, four ancient entities stirred with fury and fascination. Two mortals from another universe had not only survived, they had fought back. And now the game had changed forever. The Ashen Valley would never be the same. Nor would the galaxy. Dawn broke over the Ashen Valley, pale and cold, casting long, twisted shadows across the scorched battlefield. The survivors of the 9th Harken Infantry emerged slowly, weary, bloodied, but alive. Captain Marania Voss organized her men, her bionic eye scanning the horizon for threats. "Move out," she ordered. "Hive Saros won't wait for us." Strange and Doom followed, walking among the regiments as though the gravity of their power alone demanded respect. The guardsmen murmured under their breath, awe and fear battling in their expressions. Strange's cloak, shifted silently with each step, his eyes alert to the faint psychic tremors that still laced the valley. Doom's armor emitted a low hum, the latent energy of his armor, imbued sorcery reacting to the residual warp, taint left by the fallen Chaos Avatar. The journey toward Hive Saros was treacherous. The Ashen Valley had become a wasteland of jagged rocks, twisted remnants of artillery, and corpses of both men and demon. Strange sensed the warp pulsing even here, feeding on the death and despair like a living organism. Doom, as always, analyzed the terrain with a cold, calculating precision, noting potential ambush points, hidden traps, and structural weaknesses in the ruined landscape. "This world is designed for suffering," Strange murmured as they trudged forward. "Every step we take, every breath we draw, is a gift snatched from oblivion." Doom's voice was sharp. "Suffering is a tool, and Doom will wield it better than any creature of this galaxy." As they advanced, shadows moved along the edges of their vision. Strange raised a hand, feeling the psychic residue of unseen watchers. The warp gods were still observing. Every ripple in the air, every pulse of energy that emanated from them, sent tremors through the immaterial currents of the universe. Doom's gauntlets sparked with protective wards, preemptively shielding them from any psychic interference. By midday, the survivors had reached the outskirts of Hive Saros, a massive, shattered urban sprawl dominated by jagged towers, ruined factories, and scorched fortifications. Smoke rose in intermittent plumes, and distant artillery fire suggested that the hive was still under attack. Strange's brow furrowed. The Imperial command structure here must be struggling to maintain order amidst chaos. Captain Voss glanced at the two sorcerers. "If we survive the approach, we'll find strategic command at the upper citadel. That's where we make our stand, or fall." Doom's voice was low and unwavering. "We do not stand, we dominate." Strange exhaled slowly. "Doom, we must remember, we are not here to conquer yet. This is a universe of rules we have not mastered. One misstep and we can die." Doom's mask reflected the pale light of the burning city. "Rules are for mortals. Doom bends reality itself." The streets leading into Hive Saros were littered with the bodies of the fallen. Strange felt their presence like a cold hand on his chest. Doom's gauntlets absorbed stray warp energy lingering in the ruins, storing it for later. Both sorcerers understood the same truth. Entering the hive was not simply a matter of marching forward. It was stepping into the jaws of the galaxy itself. From the distance, a low, rhythmic pounding sounded, like drums of war echoing across the fractured spires. Strange recognized it immediately as the approach of a chaos warband. Dozens of figures advancing in unison, twisted armor glinting with warp, taint. Doom raised a gauntlet, summoning a blast of concentrated energy. "Let them come. Doom welcomes the test." Strange nodded, preparing a series of defensive wards that shimmered faintly in the dying light. "Then we fight," he whispered. "But remember, they are only a fraction of what waits within Hive Saros. The gods themselves will not forgive us." The two sorcerers, flanked by the remaining guardsmen, stepped forward into the ruined streets. Every step reverberated with tension, every shadow held the promise of death, and every heartbeat reminded them that the war had only just begun. Above them, the sky churned with warp energy. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, four gods watched. Their patience was thinning. Their curiosity was turning to hunger, and two mortals, one king, one sorcerer, had dared to defy their will. Hive Saros awaited, and within its shattered walls, destiny would soon test every ounce of their power, every shred of their cunning, and every measure of their will to survive. Hive sorrows rose before them like a monument to despair. Jagged towers clawed at the blackened sky, some broken in half, others glowing faintly with residual reactor fires that sputtered intermittently. The streets were choked with rubble, bodies, and the detritus of war. Strange felt the psychic weight immediately. The hive itself was alive with suffering, a pulse of agony echoing through every shattered spire. Doom, as always, ignored the weight of emotion, focusing instead on the structures, weak points, and the energy signatures left by hostile forces. "Stay close," Captain Voss commanded, her voice steady despite the fear that radiated from her men. "Strategic command is at the upper citadel. That's our only chance of rallying any organized resistance." Strange raised his staff, summoning a protective ward that rippled like water across the streets. "The warp is thick here. I can feel the gods' attention concentrated. They are aware of every step we take." Doom's gauntlets crackled with green energy, absorbing residual warp, taint from the air and feeding it back into his armor's systems. "Then let them watch. Doom will show them the cost of underestimating mortals, especially extraordinary mortals." The first signs of the Chaos Warband appeared quickly. Scouts half human, half fused with corrupted armor and sinew, slithered along the ruined streets, weapons primed. Strange whispered a counter-spell, weaving an invisible net of force to trip and disorient the approaching enemy. Doom unleashed a surge of arcane and technological energy, incinerating the first wave before they could fully manifest. The guardsmen advanced with renewed courage, inspired by the sorcerer's power. Their lasguns barked in rapid succession, thinning the ranks of the demonic soldiers, but more pressed from the shadows with relentless determination. Strange realized immediately that this was only the vanguard. Deeper within the hive, the real force waited. Strange glanced at Doom. "They are testing us. Every small encounter, every skirmish. They want to measure our strength and response." Doom's voice was calm but deadly. "Then we will respond in kind. Let them come." Doom does not falter under observation. They pressed forward. Each step into the hive was a step into layered danger. Strange's spells illuminated the corridors with spectral light, revealing hidden traps and ambushes. Doom's calculated movements ensured that each action, each burst of energy, each strategic strike maximized the impact while conserving their reserves. Hours passed. The deeper they moved, the more intense the psychic resonance became. The air itself pulsed with the agony of billions, amplified by the warp-tainted ruins of the hive. Strange realized that the hive was more than a city. It was a massive psychic amplifier, feeding the Chaos God's power and spreading corruption through the local warp currents. Finally, they reached the lower gates of the upper citadel. The massive doors were scorched, pitted from bombardment, and etched with signs of demonic wards. Strange's hands glowed as he traced the sigils, deciphering the magical inscriptions. Doom, standing silently, analyzed the structure. "This is not merely a barrier. It is a trap and a beacon. Whoever passes through becomes visible to forces beyond this plane." Strange nodded slowly. "Then we must move carefully. The gods will notice our intrusion immediately." Doom's gauntlets flared. Careful is for mortals. Doom is above caution. Doom is action. With a synchronized motion, Strange and Doom struck together. The magical wards unraveled under Strange's precision, while Doom's technological, sorcerous power tore the doors from their hinges. The noise echoed through the hive, a deafening signal to all who waited above, and as the doors fell, a silence followed, thick, tense, expectant. Strange sensed the presence of countless eyes upon them, some mortal, some warped by the Chaos Gods, all aware that two interlopers had breached the heart of the hive. Doom stepped forward, armor glowing with collected energy, gauntlets raised. Strange followed, staff ready, wards shimmering in anticipation. "Strategic command awaits," Captain Voss whispered, "and likely our final chance to understand what we're truly up against." Strange's eyes scanned the upper citadel. Somewhere within those towers, beyond the gates and the traps, was knowledge, survival, and answers. Doom's voice cut through the tension, unwavering. "Then let us proceed. The galaxy itself will bend or break before Doom does." The first step into the upper citadel was taken, and the storm of destiny waited. The upper citadel loomed like a fortress carved from despair itself. Massive towers spiraled into the darkened sky, their edges jagged and twisted, scarred from centuries of siege and warp corruption. Strange and Doom moved cautiously, flanked by Captain Voss and the surviving soldiers of the 9th Harken Infantry. The air thrummed with psychic energy, heavy, oppressive, almost tactile, resonating with the residual power of the Chaos Gods. Each step toward the heart of the citadel was a test of will, as if the hive itself sought to reject their intrusion. Within the command chamber, the strategic command officers had fortified themselves behind shattered barricades. Maps of the sector, riddled with scorch marks and annotations in the blood of fallen soldiers, covered the walls. Strange could feel the lingering despair radiating from the officers, the weight of hopelessness pressing down on them. Doom's gaze swept the room, calculating, evaluating, as if already strategizing how he could seize control of every tactical advantage in this ruined bastion. Captain Voss approached the officers. "These two have cleared a path here," she said, her voice steady but taut. "They are not of this galaxy, but they have the power to help or destroy." A senior officer, his face etched with fear and exhaustion, looked at Strange and Doom with disbelief. You fought the avatar of the 4 gods, alone. You've broken the laws of reality itself. Who are you?" Strange stepped forward, cloak shifting around him. "We come from another universe, a universe without warp, without chaos, without gods who feed on mortal suffering. We seek understanding, and a way to survive this one." Doom's voice was steady, commanding. "Understanding is secondary. Power is primary, and with power, survival is inevitable." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. One finally spoke. "If what you say is true, then perhaps you are the only hope this hive, and this world, has left. But you must understand the magnitude of what we face. The warp is not just a force. It is the conduit of our destruction. The 4 gods are aware of you, and they do not forget transgressions. They will act." Strange felt it immediately, a cold, pressing awareness in the back of his mind. The gods were watching, evaluating, orchestrating. Every decision they had made since entering this universe had been observed, tested. Their presence had rippled across the warp like a stone thrown into a tempest, and now the consequences were converging. Doom's gauntlets crackled faintly. "Let them come. Doom bends reality, not the other way around." The senior officer leaned closer, voice almost a whisper. "There are rumors of a relic within Hive Saros, ancient, predating even the founding of the Imperium. A device, or perhaps a weapon, that could give you leverage against them." Strange's brow furrowed. "A relic? Do you mean an artifact capable of countering the influence of the Chaos Gods?" The officer nodded. "Yes. It is said to be buried within the lower vaults of the citadel, protected by wards, traps, and something older, something alive." Doom's eyes glinted behind his mask. "Then it becomes our objective, not for survival alone, but for dominance. With such power, Even the gods themselves would hesitate before interfering. Strange's gaze flickered to the psychic shadows lingering in the citadel, remnants of the Avatar's presence. We must move carefully. Any misstep, and the gods will descend themselves. This artifact may be the only way to tip the scales, but the price could be enormous. Captain Voss swallowed, her voice trembling slightly. If you fail, the hive dies, the sector dies, and perhaps the galaxy itself will burn. Doom turned, his voice calm, cold, and absolute. Failure is not an option. Doom does not fail. Strange, though wary, allowed himself a small nod. Together, the two interlopers prepared to descend into the lower vaults of Hive Saros, toward an unknown power that could shift the balance of the universe itself. The psychic tension thickened, the air crackling with anticipation. Above them, in the churning warp, the four gods shifted, leaning closer, sensing the approach of something that dared to defy their dominion. Korn's fury roared, Inch's scheming mind twisted, Nurgle's malice festered, Slaanish's lust for sensation coiled tighter. And below, Doom and Strange stepped forward unbowed toward the relic that could change the fate of all reality, or destroy them utterly. The lower vaults of Hive Saros were nothing like the streets above. Here, the air was thick with centuries of decay, the oppressive weight of the Hive's history pressing down like a living thing. Strange felt it immediately. Every stone, every corridor, every sealed door resonated with the psychic residue of countless deaths, sacrifices, and rituals long forgotten. The wards protecting the relic were ancient, layered with magic and technology so intertwined that they seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Doom walked forward with a methodical precision, analyzing the wards, calculating how to bypass each one without unnecessary expenditure of power. Strange's voice was low, calm, but tinged with tension. The relic is not just protected physically, it's a focal point for the Hive's psychic energy. Any disturbance here will echo across the warp. The gods will feel it, and they will respond. Doom's eyes narrowed. Then we must strike decisively. Half measures invite failure. Doom does not entertain failure. They pressed forward, descending spiraling staircases carved from black stone, walls etched with warnings in forgotten tongues. Strange's staff glowed faintly, illuminating sigils that tried to claw their way into reality. He countered each with precision, unraveling centuries of psychic layering as if unweaving a tapestry. Doom moved alongside him, his gauntlets sparking with collected energy, neutralizing wards with both technological precision and arcane might. They entered a massive chamber, the air electric with anticipation. At its center rested the relic, an obelisk of blackened crystal, etched with shifting runes that shimmered with a malevolent light. Strange could feel the raw psychic energy radiating from it, the pulse of power that resonated with the warp itself. It was alive, not conscious in the human sense, but aware, observing, judging. Doom stepped closer, his gauntlets extended. "Power," he whispered. "This is power concentrated. Do you feel it, Strange?" Strange nodded, gripping his staff tightly. "Yes, and it is dangerous. The moment we touch it, the gods will know. This is the focal point of their attention, a beacon in the warp. One misstep, and it could summon an apocalypse upon us all." Doom's voice was cold, unflinching. "Then we proceed. Doom does not hesitate. The stronger the force, the more thrilling the conquest." As they approached, the obelisk pulsed violently. A psychic scream echoed through the vault, knocking the guardsmen off their feet. Strange's wards flared, shielding them, while Doom's armor absorbed the impact, energy coursing across the gauntlets and into his body. A voice, ancient and resonant, reverberated through the chamber, not spoken, but implanted directly into their minds. Intruders, you dare reach for what was never meant for mortals. You will be judged, you will be broken, and you will serve the gods, or perish. Strange's heart pounded. It knows we are here. Doom's mask reflected the pulsing runes, green light dancing across its surface. Let it know, Doom answers to none. The relic shivered as if acknowledging his defiance. Then, without warning, the walls of the chamber shifted, solid stone warping into living flesh and metal. From the shadows emerged guardians, monstrous amalgamations of ceramite, flesh, and psychic essence. Each moved with predatory precision, their intent unmistakable: destroy the interlopers. Strange whispered an incantation, binding the guardians in chains of silver light, while Doom unleashed a devastating surge of energy, shattering the first wave before it could reach them. The chamber shook with the force of their combined might, yet more guardians emerged, relentless, like shadows given form. "This will not end," Strange muttered. "They are infinite, or at least, the relic can summon them as needed." Doom's voice was calm, a razor cutting through tension. "Then we will make them finite, one by one. Doom does not fail." The battle for the relic had begun. And somewhere deep in the warp, the four gods leaned closer, their attention no longer passive. The interlopers from another universe were not merely intruding. They were challenging divinity itself. The outcome of this chamber, this hive, and perhaps the galaxy itself, hung by the thinnest thread of mortal will and extraordinary power.